MSPs suck at sales. My name is Nick Wolf. I've been in the MSP space my entire career. I was one of the first employees of Datto. I got a couple war stories of conversations that I had with MSPs that really just made my jaw drop. Be like, what? So you would rather close your business, shut down your $500 million ARR MSP, and invest a little bit of money on cyber insurance or a little bit of money on paying the ransomware to get your data back? And you're running a business? Look, if you're a small MSP, if you're just starting off, times are tough, you need money, right? But the juice has to be worth the squeeze. At some point, you have to go to a client, and don't be afraid to fire a client.
What do you think the real reason MSPs struggle to hire is?
They don't want to give up control, right? But like sometimes you really need people to do the dirty work. I mean, most MSPs are business owners. They're not sales owners first. And it's okay for you not to be the jack of all trades and tap on someone else's shoulder to sort of lead the way. How do you put your clients' minds at ease if they're worried that your vendor is going to be sold to another bigger vendor that they don't like?
Welcome back to this episode of MSP Insider. Thank you for tuning in to yet another spicy conversation for MSPs by a former MSP, talking to people that come from the MSP space. And on today's episode, I am really excited for where this one's going to go, because I actually haven't dug into a conversation with this level of perspective yet that the guest today brings. And so, Nick, before we kind of dive in, why don't you tell us who you are, what you do, and why the hell that you do it?
Yeah, sure thing. So my name is Nick Wolf. I've been in the MSP space my entire career. I got my start in the MSP space in high school, actually. I was one of the first employees of Datto and spent about a decade there. After Datto, I was around some other cybersecurity vendors in the space. Scout Cybersecurity, which was acquired by Barracuda Networks. Evo Security, which is an MFA vendor. And now I'm here at Cork, which is a cyber warranty and compliance monitoring vendor for MSPs. So I'm all in with MSPs. I love working with them all day, every day. There's probably not a trade show where I haven't been to. And, you know, that's what's in my blood. That's what keeps me up every day is, you know, the thrill of the hunt and working with MSPs of all shapes and sizes. At this rate, there's really not something I haven't seen yet.
Yeah, and I think you just scored the largest stack of MSP points out of anyone by saying that you spent 10 years at Datto, at least as a guest on the show, because Datto, man, that was like the Cinderella story of the MSP space. Just as far as vendors went, they did so many things right.
Yeah, so the way that I was loving Datto so much that when I got into college, the way that I stacked my schedule was I was at a local commuter college in Connecticut. I would go to college Tuesdays and Thursdays, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., 5 classes each day, really stack up my schedule. And then Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I was full-time at Datto, essentially, working there in Norwalk. And I really, you know, it was really lucky for me because I got the opportunity to learn real-world experience to the point where I was learning more from people like Austin McCord and Rob Ray and some of the other legends at Datto than I really was learning from, you know, a guy in his 70s teaching me about Twitter in my college class. So I was really blessed to do that during my college experience.
Yeah, and I can only imagine too, because of the growth trajectory of Datto, and that's not what the show is going to be about, but like you had to have seen so much in those 10 years as well for the MSP industry, because the industry alone changed so much in that duration of time, but Datto changed so much and changed the industry as a result of what it did.
100%. When we started Datto in the early days, you know, when my first day at Datto was June 2011. You know, it was a lot about break fix, right? Going from break fix to MSP. And, you know, over the last decade, you know, we've seen that evolve. It's not break fix to MSP anymore. It's really MSP to MSSP work, you know, leading with the cybersecurity play first.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right. So you may or may not know this, but the way that we kick the show off is actually by bringing a question from the prior guest to open the show, just to kind of spark things up. It's a little bit like a double blind date. So the guest doesn't know who my next guest is going to be that gets the question. And you obviously don't know that it's coming. But I'm going to start with that question. We'll see what the answer leads to. And then we'll just kind of dive into the conversation from there. Sound good?
All right. I love it. Hit me.
All right. Awesome. So the question for you actually comes from Dr. Zoidberg himself, Dean Trampelis, from currently at Empath. And his question is, what is the single biggest thing that pisses you off about the MSP industry, and why haven't you done a fucking thing to solve it?
That's a good question. MSPs suck at sales. Like,
Mm.
I've been on the phone with thousands of MSPs over the last decade and a half, and I would be a retired person right now if I got $1 for each MSP that said, Nick, let me stop you right there before you get into your presentation. I'm not like other MSPs. I focus on small businesses. All my customers are small businesses under 100 employees. And I really struggle selling to them. I'm like, first
Mm.
off, you're an MSP. I think, 9 out of 10 MSPs are focusing on the SMB market. So, like, there's that.
Yeah.
I would really love to see more MSPs take their sales training a lot seriously and invest in tools. There's a lot of good companies out there. There's Robin Robbins, there's peer groups, there's the Chris Weiser Facebook group. There's
Mm-hmm.
there's Facebook groups, there's communities. Get out there and invest the time in proper sales and marketing to really help your business out. There's a lot of MSPs that I come across, and it's like you don't even have a website. Like your LinkedIn
Yeah.
page, your LinkedIn photo is just like a gray photo and you have 12 connections. Like, no
Mm-hmm.
wonder why you're not getting clients. You're not building yourself up. So,
Yeah.
I haven't fixed that yet because, I'm a sales guy. I focus on helping MSPs make money and, taking credit cards. But I think,
Sure.
the MSP industry as a whole could be doing a better job there.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you said that too, because you are absolutely correct. Having spent 18 years in it, I was fortunate enough about halfway through my journey to flip from tech to sales and then eventually to lead and grow sales teams. And that was one of the things that I noticed the most at the peer group events and like the events that I was at too, is like people would catch wind of the results we were having. And it was sort of like a moth to the flame, right? Because it was like this totally demystified thing that they actually saw and sat in the same room as someone who was growing an MSP. And by growth, we were hitting, the one MSP was about $150,000 a year in net new MR, and the other MSP we were more in like the $85,000 range for its size. But even still, like those numbers put up had other MSPs just like totally confused by that it was real, right? And that it could be done. And that's ultimately what it came down to most of the time when I went into those conversations, was like, well, help me understand, like, how do you approach sales now? Well, it's owner led. Okay, great. Well, like, what's your number? What do you mean, what's my number? You want my phone number? You want like my email address? Like, no, what's the number that you're carrying as a quota carrying rep? Well, I'm the owner. Oh, yeah. Okay. So what's your number? Right? Like, well, I don't know. I wanted to get like 5 clients last year. I'm like, okay, so I already know where the problem is, because they just lacked a lot of the fundamentals of professional sales. And it's not their fault, because they didn't get into the business to be a salesperson. They didn't get into the business to really grow a business in that regard, right? It was just a person who didn't want to work for someone else and was really good with computers and decent with people. They turned around one day and kind of had a company, at least in my experience. I don't know
Yep.
if that's
I mean,
right.
most MSPs are business owners. They're not sales owners first. And it's okay for you not to be the jack of all trades and tap on someone else's shoulder to sort of lead the way. Like
Mm-hmm.
Austin, when he founded Datto, like he's an engineer at heart, right? He went to
Yeah.
RIT. He loves rolling up his sleeves, coding, technology, doing that sort of thing.
Yeah.
He didn't want to do sales, so that's why he tapped on people like Rob Ray to really run business development, and to really take
Yeah.
the ball and run it.
Yeah. And I think the unlock there is probably a level of discomfort, right? Obviously a level of trust, uh, but also like making the commitment to just getting out of your own way,
Mm-hmm.
right? Bring in the right person with the right reasons, with the right incentives, with the right outcomes, with the right objectives, and align that through the org, and then just turn it loose if you really want to grow. That was again another kind of trait that I stumbled across. So many, maybe not having that path led for them, or the information really making it their way. But um, anyway, there's so much more that I believe you have to offer to the conversation than beating that particular drum. Although we could do an entire episode on sales and selling, maybe we'll bring it back for that one. I wanted this one to really like tap into the depth and the breadth of your experience, because you've talked to thousands of MSPs, you've conducted business with thousands of MSPs, right?
Yep.
And as a result, you've gone through probably like 10x that many conversations. So I'm sure there's probably nothing that you haven't heard from an MSP. And through sort of like sifting through those stories, if you will, there's got to be some mindset areas, some beliefs, some dogmas, some just like trauma, all that stuff that MSPs bring to the table. And I thought we could start off the conversation by really kind of going through that, because hopefully when people hear the words come out of your mouth, unfortunately for them, it might be words that have come out of their mouth. And maybe this can be the episode that we shake them on their shoulders and stare them in the eye and tell them that they need to do better, or that they should change their tone a bit.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, yeah, like you said, I've spoken to a lot of MSPs in my career. I've spoken to one-man shops. I've spoken to mature MSPs with hundreds of employees, MSPs that are growing, MSPs that are getting acquired, MSPs that are going out of business, or the guys retiring. I've really seen it all. And, there's a lot of podcasts and webinars that are out there that teach about best practices and the 5 things you should do and do this to grow your business. But yeah, I got a couple war stories of, conversations that I had with MSPs that really just made my jaw drop. Be like, what? And you're running a business? What? And that's your mentality? Like, first off, I'm a greedy sales rep, right? So like, I want to take the MSP's money. Like, the customer is always right. But like, there is some point where I'm like thinking in the back of my head, like, how are you an MSP? Like, how, like, geez, and you've been in the MSP shoes, so like I'll tell you a couple of these stories, and I really want your feedback. Like, what would you do in this situation? So
yeah, let's do it. We'll just kind of do some rotation here of like hot takes and rapid fire stuff.
Yeah. So one that I had over the summer was around cyber insurance. And all right, so Cork, shameless plug, we do cyber warranty and help MSPs with cyber insurance. That's the thing that we do. Contact me later if you want a demo. So I was like giving the pitch to one of my MSPs that I was on the phone with, and they were a Canadian-based MSP. And I was talking about the value of a cyber insurance policy, how it could help financially recover and get them back on their feet, or their client back on their feet if there's a big attack like ransomware, things of that nature. This is cybersecurity 101.
Yeah.
And I thought he was joking at first, but he was pretty stern and adamant. And his attitude was, oh, you know what? I really don't care if I get hacked or if my clients get hacked. I'd rather close the business. I'd rather them close their business than pay a single cent towards ransomware or paying a single cent towards cyber insurance. So you would rather close your business, shut down your, $500 million ARR MSP than invest a little bit of money on cyber insurance or a little bit of money on paying for the ransomware to get your data back.
Yeah.
Like,
it's insane, isn't it? Like, and this actually, it triggers me for a couple of reasons, mostly because as an MSP that would have never operated that way or never subscribed to that belief, this is one of Matt Lee's biggest pet peeves with the industry, actually, is that there is no litmus test or benchmark or industry standard or obviously like qualification process to become an MSP, right? Like, you don't even have to start up an LLC to do it. You could just call yourself an MSP, grab a keyboard and go. And that belief, like, I have to sit and think about the mindset of someone who would say that, but I do think you typecast them correctly. It probably is that MSP that's somewhere between 500K and $1 million in ARR. They have 1 or 2, maybe 3 employees, right? Kind of doing it. It's sort of like today's version of, as Dean would have called it, the trunk slammers. And so like, they just sit riding on that edge of having gambled so much for so long without maybe being burned, that they think that it's acceptable to continue with that mindset, but it's asinine. And unfortunately, the thing that like waters down the rest of the industry, if you really think about it that way too, because
and it's crazy because I met this MSP at a trade show. It was a local trade show event in Toronto over the summer. Like, so like he is investing in his business to like be involved in the community, but like the fact that he would just say that and reiterate it to me, I'm like, what? Like, all right, if you don't want cyber insurance, like, okay, you should have it. Like, if you don't want to pay off the ransomware, all right, even the government says you shouldn't pay off ransomware in some scenarios. But it's just the mentality of like, I would rather shut down my business than spend money on backup, spend money on cyber insurance, spend money on ransomware. I was shaking my head hard that day.
Yeah, because there's so much conviction in the belief too, right? Like, there's no talking them off that ledge. Like, this is just the way that they are. Because I don't know why. I mean, I could probably sit down and like unpack it or whatever, but it's a strange, another correlation to take it a little bit off of that one. I always found that the technical folks, my coworkers, my peers, and I was technical before I was sales. So like me too. Like I wore the amount of effort that I put into something as the badge of honor, right? Working 70-hour weeks was the thing that just had to be done so that you could say that you did it, right? Working 13 hours to get that thing resolved or pushing extra hard on the project. Like it was sort of this mentality, this approach, this mindset of going that hard just to be able to like wear it as our own badge of honor or like stripe of pride. But really it's kind of like a scarlet letter. You just can't see it because you're so caught up in the reality where that might be true, but that's just not reality, right? Like that's gambling at its best or at its least in this
Mm-hmm.
example. Yeah. What other kind of stories have you heard?
All right. So another one was around, pricing. So typically, on all the vendors that I would work with, whether it was Data or Scout or Cork, we bring on the MSP into the platform. We charge the MSP for our services and our endpoint licenses, whatever the pricing structure is. The MSP would bundle that into their, managed services agreement and recharge the customer. So every now and then I come across an MSP that's like, I'm a little bit different with my vendors. If I sign up for a vendor XYZ, I'd rather input 5, 10, 20 different credit cards, one for each of my client. That way the vendor bills the client directly. So if the client, doesn't pay him, it's on the vendor and the client. But I'm just scratching my head there. I'm like, how are you building a layer of value add around that? Like if you have a Sentinel-1 portal, right? And you have 100 licenses across 10 clients and you have 10 different credit cards in there, 10 endpoints client 1, 10 endpoints client 2. It's like, what value are you bringing to the table if you're dealing with clients that are that nervous about paying you on a monthly recurring basis? Like you should be packaging in all of your tools into one agreement and charging your client, a flat rate cost, call it $200 a user. And that should be your stack, right? Your RMM tool, backup tool, EDR tool. And the idea of having a customer paying their MSP for like managing something, but also having that customer pay 5, 10, 20 different vendors, I was just really scratching my head there. So like in the past with your MSP, how would you guys do it? Would you pay your vendors and then the customers would pay you, or did you have it set it up differently?
No, we had it set up as you described, where everything we were delivering to the client was wrapped up into one agreement and written into it, right? And I think that at the core of it, the challenge that is maybe not so obvious in that situation is a challenge that a lot of MSPs struggle with, and that is that they really don't know their numbers and they don't know how to price their services and they don't know how to charge for their services. And as a result, like to me, that just screams like a cash flow problem, right? Like I'm concerned that my customers won't pay me or I don't have enough cash in the bank to float the this or the that. So I'm just going to make them put it on their card to begin with. And like, it's a giant red flag that there's a lot of other things going on that you ought to probably resolve as a business. Like know where your numbers are and like really look at your pricing and figure out what you're charging. And ultimately, to your point, what value are you truly delivering to your customers? Like I can't even imagine asking a client to do that. I'd be embarrassed to ask my client to do that.
Yep. And look, if you're a small MSP, if you're just starting off, like I get times are tough, you need money, right? But the juice has to be worth the squeeze. At some point, you have to go to a client, and don't be afraid to fire a client. You know, walk away from people that are just going to cause more trouble than they're worth.
Yeah, absolutely. What other things did you make you just scratch your head? Be like, I can't believe I just had this conversation.
Yeah. So like when I get a new lead on my appointment calendar, right? When one of my BDRs, SDRs books an appointment for me, I like to, do my own reconnaissance. Let me find this person on LinkedIn. Let me check out their website, try to learn a little bit more and do my own due diligence so I can have a more effective call when I'm presenting whatever product I'm presenting. Right now it's Quark. And like there'd be some scenarios where like, how is this guy operating a business? Like he's living under a rock. Like he put in, MSPXYZ.com as his email address, and I go there, the website's down or it's like parked, with no content on it. All right, let me find this guy on LinkedIn. All right. He has a LinkedIn page. Maybe he has like 12 connections on LinkedIn. He has a gray, profile picture that he hasn't really uploaded. Let me see if I can find him on Facebook. All right. His last Facebook post was 2018 about buy my, IT product. So like, so the lack of marketing to some of these MSPs, really surprises me. And when I call it out, sometimes the MSPs are just like, look, I don't have a website. I don't market my MSP. I'm referral based only. I turn away customers. I'm very selective who I work with. So I guess like, why are you on the phone with me as a vendor if you're like turning away
Yeah.
business left and right? You should be on the phone with a hiring agency trying to get more customers. So, in your shoes as an MSP, do you ever come across an MSP that's like, thanks, but no thanks. We don't want any more money. We don't want any more clients. Like, what's the logic there for turning away business?
Yeah, I think it's a different way of taking control over the circumstance they don't know how to like resolve. It kind of goes back to how we opened the show. MSPs by and large suck at sales, suck at selling. The ones that might say they don't might be really good at order taking, but they still suck at selling usually, right? And we would define order taking as like you've really only grown with referral only or network based referrals and that kind of thing. And like your conversations go a little bit more something like this. Well, how many users do you have? How many locations do you have? How many devices do you have? Great. Are you on Office 365 or G Suite? You're really just like order taking. You're putting together the details you need to build a quote and send it out. And you send it out and you follow up once, maybe twice before you're off to the next thing. And if they never got back to you, you never really drove it home. And then they call that sales. But the reality is like sales is taking someone from like problem unaware, solution unaware, all the way down to I want you now, and I only want you. And there's a whole spectrum in between there because I want the outcome that you provide. And that's a totally different approach to growing the business. And so what I think to the point of your question is because of the amount of space that exists between where they are and where they need to be to get to the point where they're actually having constructive and productive growth conversations, it's a lot easier to just say, well, I'm good where we are, or I don't need to grow. I generally turn business away, right? Like it's this like there's a psychological principle for it, and I forget the name of it now, but it's like this safety component of like, well, because I suck at this, but I won't admit it to myself, I can take control of it by doing this thing instead, or I can label it differently, and then it doesn't hurt as bad. So it's kind of like a protective nature of the internal identity and the security that they need psychologically would be my thought or my answer.
Gotcha. And sort of a spin-off scenario that I had with another MSP last year was, I I do my discovery. I'm talking about their business, and I'm like, yep. And they're like, yeah, we're at 1,500 managed endpoints now. We're looking to get down to about 1,000 managed endpoints by the end of the year. Say that again? Oh, we're looking to get down from 1,500 managed endpoints to 1,000 managed endpoints. Yeah. So at first that took me back. Then I'm like, what are you doing here? And he gave a kind of good explanation where he's like, I kind of want to trim the fat and like get rid of lower clients that aren't paying as much. I'd rather focus on, a little bit bigger clients and do a price increase, to sort of scare away the smaller guys. And then the people that are going to actually afford and keep the price increase stick around. So my question to you is, have you ever been around an MSP that wants to trim the fat, purposely wants to get rid of some accounts? Like, not necessarily fire one or two clients, but like be like, hey, this 10%, 20% of clients, we got to pass them over to our sister company or we don't want them anymore.
Yeah, I have. I don't know that I haven't experienced it how in the way you described though. The way that I experienced it was we've been in business for 15 years. We still got some like cocktail napkin agreements that we haven't touched. We haven't resold. We haven't like it's this disgusting book of legacy clients that you just haven't gone back and done your due diligence on to like get them to pay you or deliver the services that you're selling in today's world. And so usually in those scenarios, it's like, hey, we are either going to make the decision to upsell them or move them on, but we'll only offset the current revenue with the net new revenue we've brought in. Right. So like in that scenario, I wouldn't have seen it the way you described, where I'm going to go from 1,500 seats to 1,000 seats intentionally. We normally would have seen that as, hey, I'm going to sell myself another 20 seats. And when I do, I'm going to get rid of the 20 seats, or I'm going to risk losing those 20 seats by trying to upsell them. And if they say no, at least I've replaced that revenue already. That's a new one though. That's a new take on growth. Not saying there's anything necessarily wrong with it outside of the fact that you're probably cutting the the clients that are hurting your gross margin anyways, in
Yeah.
a way, right? But like, why not look to displace the revenue rather than just cut the revenue or replace the revenue?
Yep.
Be how I'd be
And you
thinking.
mentioned something interesting in your response there was about how you have a couple old clients on cocktail napkins as the contracts. Couple ways that I could take that. First of all, I was one of Netflix's first subscribers, right? And even though I subscribed to them so many years ago, they have still been increasing my pricing, right?
Right.
So,
Yep.
like, look, even if you were the early access, and we're grateful for that, at some point, that grandfathered legacy pricing expires, and you got to be matched up.
Yeah.
Second of all, is if you're an MSP and you're making $1 million a year or more, let's call it $500,000 a year or more, and you got more than one employee, like you need to have an extra set of eyes and ears on your legal agreements. I'd be very,
Mm,
that's something that surprised me as well. Like again, I would be on calls with MSPs and they're like, hey, can you send me over, a legal agreement that I should send over to my client for them to buy this backup appliance? And I'm like,
yeah.
I'm a backup guy. I
Right.
sell backup. I sell, this.
Yeah.
I sell that. I'm not a lawyer. Like,
Yeah.
go out and like invest in a proper lawyer. I mean, Brad Gross, he does a great job in the MSP space.
Mm-hmm.
There's tons of, lawyers out there, and like get a lawyer that knows about the MSP space. Don't get your cousin that, knows real estate law.
Yeah.
Invest the amount of time. If you're taking your business seriously, like what sort of counsel did your old MSP have? Was it a contract? Was it, a friend of
Yeah.
a friend? What did you guys have?
No, we had legit professional, sort of best of breed representation with retainer and everything because of the reasons you just described. Like the world in the last, let's just call it the MSP world in the last 4 years, 5 really, but like specifically the last 18 months, it's evolving so fast. One, at a regulatory level, two, at a compliance level, and then three, at like the mismatch and sort of maybe the alignment between where the market is and where the MSP is has never kind of been as close or as parallel as it is today, in my opinion. Meaning, um, because the outside entities are forcing clients to be far more aware of what they're required to do, all the way down to the insurance companies on their side too, right? They're uh, the 3 or 4 policies they have are now going to have all these extra pages in the due diligence or in the underwriting process about cyber, as an example. And so the client, our client as MSPs, are the clients of the MSPs, they're far more aware, maybe not so much educated, but they're aware of the requirements that they need to ensure they're fulfilling. So like they're driving those conversations, and just to stay out in front of that, like it's not the cocktail napkin world anymore. Or if it is, it's going to be that first hot take you provided where it was like, I'm perfectly fine if I get breached or if they get breached because I'd rather go out of business or they go out of business rather than, you know,
Yeah.
put on my big boy pants and run a real company.
Yeah. My suggestion is again, if you're an MSP, get a lawyer, do it once, do it right. Once that agreement is actually all done and buttoned up, it's just rinse and repeat from there. You're just sending out
Yeah.
the same agreement time and time again. So if
Mm-hmm.
you invest properly on day one, you're going to be setting yourself up for success. And that's going to
Yeah.
make your business look more organized and more proper for your exit, right?
Yeah.
Because everybody's here to
Absolutely.
make money. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
MSPs, they might be bought by another MSP. They might sell it to one of their technicians, you
Mm-hmm.
know. So start planning that for the future as well.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a great point. One of my partners earlier on had this saying where he was a buy once, cry once kind of person. And at first I didn't quite understand it until we unpacked it and I watched certain decisions get made where it was kind of like, could I go to Chat GPT and ask for, whatever, an agreement to be written up for me? I mean, you can, right? And what's it going to cost you? I don't know, the $20 subscription. Or to your point, you could go with someone who's like an industry expert like Brad Gross and say, I don't care what it's going to cost me to have the thing done because I know that it's ironclad, it's battle tested. There's tens of thousands of this version out there, right? And like it might suck and it might be the last check I want to cut this month because I might not even get paid if I cut it. But by buying once and crying once and doing it right the first time, it's a solid foundation to build everything, which is your business, on from there, especially when it comes to legal.
Yeah.
Because what's interesting about about legality, and no, this isn't legal advice, so don't come after me for it, but here's a reality check for it, is just because it's right and just because it's just doesn't really matter, because in the legal space, like you can bring litigation for anything, to anyone, for any reason. Even if it's frivolous, you can still do it. And it's just like, it's not a battle of right and wrong. It's a battle of resources. And whoever has the most resources is going to win because they can draw it out long enough. And that's an interesting experience and an interesting truth too. So like, shore it up at the beginning, right? Don't risk it and gamble it for no reason.
Plus, it will
Just
impress your customers, right? Oh, I'm doing business with an official
yeah,
IT company that's going to be watching over my precious data, making sure I don't hack. This is more
yeah,
formal than, MSP at gmail.com sending me an email saying, I am doing these 3 things. Please reply to
yeah,
the
yeah,
email saying yes.
yeah.
All right, I got
Absolutely.
I got another doozy for you here.
Okay.
So, whenever a vendor's pitching a product, we got to figure out product market fit. Is the thing I'm selling you something you want to buy? Okay, great.
Mm-hmm.
Pricing. Is the thing I'm selling you something you and your clients can afford? All right, so check 1, check 2, and those are the 2 big ones. But every now and then I ran into to this MSP probably about a year ago, and he liked what we were selling. He liked the price of it. Check, check.
Mm-hmm.
But the way that he does his timing for his MSP is he only evaluates new tools once a year. Doesn't matter what the tool is, what the tool does. He flat out told me, your tool could cure cancer, and that's great. It could cure cancer later on in the year when I evaluate all my tools. And with rapidly changing technologies, especially in the MSP and the cybersecurity space, like,
Yeah.
what do you say to something like that? If there's like a massive attack happening right now and it's affecting your RMM, there's another RMM attack like Kaseya or SolarWinds had, and I could
Yeah.
sell you, my widget here that will fix it. Are you
Yeah.
going to say, nah, I'll look at it in 6 months because that's when I evaluate those types of things? Or does
No.
it come to a point where you drop what you're doing and bring something to the front burner because it's just that cool and sick? Like, what do you say
Yeah.
to an MSP with that type of mentality that says, he literally said, that's great that you could cure cancer. You could cure cancer later in the year.
Right. Yeah. I think 2 things come to my mind. The first is that position sounds like it was a pendulum that swung all the way to that direction because they were also probably the same MSP that had shiny object syndrome and bought the thing every time it looked cool and came out. And then it just became another piece of shelfware because they didn't take the time, the energy, the resources to actually deploy it, operationalize it, make it useful. Right. So it sounds more like, hey, let's solve that problem by almost like having this gated access, right? A cohort sort of tool changes to their stack every year. And that's it's fixing the problem the wrong way, right? Because the hard truth, in my opinion, is that reality unfolds one day at a time, especially in today's reality, where none of us have existed ever. Now, there's not a single human being alive today that has any historical context or like leg up over anyone else because of the way AI and technology has completely revolutionized what is possible, what is capable, and unlocking the capabilities and the features and the functions of like what anyone and everyone's able to do. Not just vendors, not just you as the MSP, not just us as individuals, but like we're all on the same playing field now. Like it's level. And you just have to lean into whether or not you're going to embrace it and figure it out and like jump on that Bronco and figure out how to ride for your 8 seconds or not and totally miss the show. But as David Powell says, like you can't afford to sleep on this one
Mm-hmm.
either. And it's not just that AI is a buzzword. It's not the same reality anymore. And so what I think is probably the harder truth for that particular MSP with that kind of a position is because reality is unfolding one day at a time, like you need real-time intelligence to execute real-time decisions within the reality of what's actually unfolding, right? Because and this is might even be the greatest example to tie the two together, a year time frame and AI. If we'd have recorded this about 5 weeks ago, ChatGPT wasn't even publicly available within that 1 year's time of when I might have been evaluating stuff, right? And that's kind of insane to think
Mm-hmm.
about as well. But look at how technology has evolved in those last 12 months as a result of false beliefs being broken and technological advances being released, right? They just released their operator version, right? Where it can actually do so many other things that people may not even be aware of yet. And that came out 3 days ago, 4 days ago, something like that. And so to wall off with total blinders on the ability or capacity or flexibility to make decisions that will actually put your business in a place to succeed or win or beat the competition through a calendar constraint like that, I think is foolish.
Yeah, I think with this fast-paced technology and society, you have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. Like I think back in the days of me being in the trenches at Datto, right? Going from their
Yeah.
21st employee to the company growing to 50 employees, to 100, to 200, to all the way up to 2,000. Like that's a lot of changes, right? And you
Yeah.
have to, being in a startup, being in a security company, 12 months, right? It
Yeah.
could feel like 10 years. You could have new team members, you could have new investors if your MSP gets bought, or your favorite vendor might get acquired by your least favorite vendor. Like,
Yeah.
a lot can happen in 12 months.
Yeah. Yeah. We don't even have to name names there with
Yeah.
your history, right? Okay. So um, let's transition a little bit. Let's
Sure.
go through kind of rapid fire questions. Again, I would be foolish if I didn't tap into your breadth and depth of experience talking with MSPs of all levels across the globe for the last more than a decade.
Yep.
And so these questions are more teed up to get an impulsive reaction as a result of the experience you have going through those conversations with them. So the first question that I have, we'll kind of start in the security sector, but what is the dumbest security excuse that you have heard in MSP that actually believed it? Heard from an MSP, excuse me, that actually believed it.
Dumbest excuse that the customer gave the MSP?
Yeah, that you've heard from an MSP, but they actually believed it. So more like those stories you had originally where it was like, this is their belief
Well,
and they
I guess
truly
there's
believed it.
uh, a lot of MSPs are really. I'm going to say my answer to that is around Microsoft. And I want to be careful here because Microsoft does a lot of good things, but you also don't want
Mm,
to get all your eggs in one basket here. So, like,
yeah.
every now and then I'll run into a client, an MSP that says, I struggle selling my services, my stack, because the client says, oh, we use Microsoft. They do that for us, right? They have
Yeah.
Windows Defender. They have Microsoft Authenticator for MFA, right? My data's
Mm-hmm.
in OneDrive, right? Like, I use Microsoft. So that's the answer to all my
Yeah.
prayers, right? Like,
Yep.
look, even if ransomware hits my local workstation, my data's in the cloud in OneDrive. I'm safe, right? So
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah, that's just
Yeah.
you got to be
It's
selling the value of your stack. Like there's a
yeah.
reason why McDonald's cheap $1 hamburger tastes the way that it does versus a nice steak dinner at Ruth Chris. Yeah, they both come
Mm,
from a cow, but different
yeah.
ingredients and how they're put together.
Right. Yeah. A lot's different in the start to finish process there.
Mm-hmm.
Next question. Complete this sentence. The MSP who still uses break fix pricing in 2025 is.
Going out of business.
Yeah. All right. I don't even need to add to that one. What's the one security tool that MSPs waste money on, but no one wants to admit it?
All right. One tool MSPs waste money on that nobody wants to admit it. I feel that that's got to be around SIM technology. SIM
Mm,
technology is super important, but it's also really, really complex. So I get the feeling that a lot of people are using like the SIM and log monitoring solutions to like collect all this data, but like
yeah.
they're not properly sending it to a SOC team, and like their help desk, their technicians is overwhelmed as it is. So, ooh, look at this really shiny thing. I'm gonna buy it. I'm gonna put it on my shelf because
Mm-hmm.
people say you should buy SIM, you should buy log monitoring and collect all this stuff, but they never actually do anything with it, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. And that's actually something that we could probably sit on for a second because the underlying truth in your statement is also true across a broader spectrum of the MSP stack. And that is like we believe that we solved the problem or we accomplished the thing when we made the decision or we bought the tool or we turned it on or we set up the integration, but we struggle because we take our eye off the ball. We don't have the discipline to like run it all the way through operationalizing it. So maybe, I switched my EDR from this tool to that tool and I put the script in my RMM and I deployed it and I got like 70% coverage, but then there's all the edge cases and the anomalies and yada yada. But then I'm off to the next thing and I've left 30% of my my surface area unprotected. And
That's why
that's far
AI
more common.
automation really comes into play. Like I really like what people like Roost and Pia and a lot of those automation companies are doing is because they're, trying to make the MSP's lives easier and make it more structured. That way,
Yeah.
if Jimmy, your level 2 technician, leaves you, it's not like the business shuts down because a lot of that
Mhm.
stuff should be continuously running and Jimmy was just keeping an eye on things.
Yeah. I completely agree. What do you think the real reason MSPs struggle to hire is?
Struggle to hire is because a lot of MSPs, they don't want to give up control, right? It might just
Mm.
be, an owner, right? And he has a couple technicians and this owner wants to do everything. He still wants to be face to face with the customers going, "Yep, you're doing business with Bob's MSP and I'm Bob."
Yeah.
But like sometimes you really need people to do the dirty work. People to approach saying, "Hey, I'm your sales rep. We're increasing our prices 10%. It's across the board and it's a little less personal. They don't have to storm off and go, well, I'm going to Bob because I've been working with Bob. It's, yeah, Bob's
Yeah.
the owner, but like I've been the sales rep for the last 4 years now doing business with your account.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, definitely it's okay to give up the reins. Like I think back again, the early days of Datto, Austin was the big cheese. He was the CEO, right? But he surrounded
Mm-hmm.
himself with really, really smart people and he delegated, right? He didn't
Mm-hmm.
know marketing, right? So he hired a really
Yeah.
kick-ass marketing person. He didn't know
Yeah.
business development, so we got Rob Ray. So,
Yeah.
it's okay to admit that even though you're the owner and the founder and this is your baby, that you need
Mm-hmm.
other people to take care of your baby.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. If MSPs disappeared tomorrow, what percentage of SMBs would actually notice?
I would say half. Half of SMBs are like truly utilizing MSPs on a good basis.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, it's a multi-billion-dollar business, and then the other half of the MSPs, or SMBs out there, oh, my nephew could help out with this or that, or helping me send this
Yeah.
email, or oh, I'm running into a technology issue. Let me Google it, or let me look on Reddit. Right? Oh, I'm
Hmm.
having this issue with my printer, or issue saving this file or uploading that file. I
Mm-hmm.
would say it's a 50-50 split.
Yeah. Or the newest one's probably like, I'll just ask ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Right. Let me take this picture and put it in there. What percentage of MSP owners actually understand their numbers?
I would say around 60 to 70% have some visibility into their numbers. Like, yeah, we're doing good, but like, if you were to like peel a layer back, be like, what's your EBITDA? What's your
Yeah.
profit? Like,
Right.
like, could you afford to hire 2 more employees, or what milestone do you need to get to afford and have enough money to afford that employee? That's a totally
Yeah.
different question. But I think 60 to 70% at least have some idea of the money that's coming through the door. Yeah.
Yeah. It's
But
like cash in,
they need
cash
to make
out, and what's
they
left
need to make
over.
sense of that data, right? Make their money
Right.
work for them and make sure they're doing things that are right for the business.
Yeah.
Like again, one of the horror stories I heard from another MSP is yeah, most of my clients are nonprofit. And I really don't charge them that money. I just do it because I'm a nice guy and I like taking care of nonprofits, like, which is nice. And a
Yeah.
lot of MSPs do have nonprofits in their business, but again, they have nonprofits in their business. They're
Mm-hmm.
running a business, right? So,
Yeah. Not nonprofits in my charity.
yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I actually just had a coaching call with an MSP earlier today on that very specific topic. There's nothing wrong with nonprofits as a vertical. And there is a way to do it, and to do it profitably, and to do it well, and to not take advantage of them at the same time. It's just, it's positioning, it's mindset, it's messaging more than anything else.
Yep.
And those things oftentimes I think are overlooked because, again, MSP owners don't traditionally come through the school of growth or through the school of sales. They come at it through the lens of, I know how to fix things and I'm pretty good at talking to people. And they ended up with a company because they just kept going and they never quit. And that's not to discount or discredit them. It's just the way that the majority of the MSP market has evolved or grown.
Yep.
Yeah. Awesome. Um, This has been a fun conversation, Nick. I appreciate the back and forth a bit
Yeah, this is great.
between all your experience. Before we move to the last question, why don't you tell people where they can find more of Nick if they're interested in Cork or anything else that you're involved in?
Yeah, sure thing. So I'm very active on LinkedIn. You could find me. It's linkedin.com/Wolf Nick, WOLF, like the animal, Nick, NICK. Or you could email me, nwolf@corkinc.com. Again, Cork, we do cyber warranties, cyber insurance for MSPs. We were created by Austin McCord, the founder of Datto. So it's great to be working with him again. And you'll see us at some events this year. I'll be at the Right of Boom trade show coming up in Las Vegas in a little bit, and you'll definitely be seeing me down on the road.
Yeah, that's awesome. So before you go, you get the opportunity to ruin the next guest's day. So if you could leave one question behind to open the show that they have to answer, what would that question be?
Okay. How do you put your clients' minds at ease if they're worried that your vendor is going to be sold to another bigger vendor that they don't like?
That is a good question. I can't wait to see who I get to drop that one on. Again, thank you for being here, Nick, and thank you everyone for tuning in to this episode of MSP Insider.
All right. Thanks for having me.